My name is Natalie Quinn, and I'm 34 years old. If you had asked me a year ago what I was to my family, I would have said daughter, sister, mom. Now I know the title they'd quietly given me was something else. I was the babysitter, the backup plan, the cleanup crew. On New Year's Eve, my mother didn't ask me anything. She issued a command. You'll take the kids overnight. We have plans. She was standing in my kitchen doorway like she owned the place, coat still on, keys in hand, the way people stand when they're already halfway out of your life. Behind her, my sister folded her arms and smirked. We already told them, she added, like a judge announcing a sentence that had already been carried out. I just nodded, not because I agreed, because for once I didn't need them to know what I was thinking. They thought this was going to be just like every other holiday, every other birthday, every other emergency they'd dumped on me. For 5 years straight, I'd been the family babysitter. Never officially, of course. No one sat me down and asked. It was just assumed. Birthdays, anniversaries, work events, beach trips. If my sister had plans, the kids were dropped at my place. If my parents had dinner reservations or a weekend getaway, they would call last minute and say, "We're bringing the kids." Always in that tone that made it sound like a favor to me, like they were gifting me their presence, not stealing my time. No money, no warning, no respect. Just this unspoken rule that Natalie will say yes. Natalie always says yes. And for 5 years, I did. Because I love my niece and nephew. I really do. I love the way my niece's nose scrunches when she laughs, the way my nephew lines up his toy cars by color, the way they run to me like I'm home. But love shouldn't be a leash. It had gotten to the point where even my own kids would glance at the calendar and ask, "Are they coming again this weekend?" Like we were just the spare house, the backup family. This year, I decided things would change. It started one quiet night in early December. The kids were asleep. The dishwasher hummed in the background. I was at the table with my boyfriend Liam, our hands wrapped around the same mug of Too Strong coffee. He glanced at the scribbled notes I had made about our holiday plans, movie nights, game nights, nothing fancy, just us. "They're going to crash it again, Nat," he said softly. "You know they will." He wasn't being cruel, just honest. He'd watched my family treat our home like a free hotel for years. Watched our dates canceled, our weekends hijacked, our kids' birthdays turned into someone else's childcare solution. He set the mug down and met my eyes. "I love your niece and nephew," he said, "but I'm tired of our life being whatever your mom decides at the last minute, aren't you?" My throat tightened. I thought about all the just this once favors that never ended. I thought about the way my mother would say, "You're the responsible one," like it was both a compliment and a sentence. "No more guilt," I whispered. "Not this year." We agreed. No more last-minute dumping. No more showing up unannounced with backpacks and excuses. If they wanted help, they could ask. Respectfully, in advance. And if they didn't, we would say no. For once, we would choose our family. So when New Year's Eve rolled around and my mom said, "You'll take the kids overnight. We have plans," it didn't even sound like a conversation. It sounded like a default setting. My sister stood behind her, that same smug tilt to her mouth. "We already told them," she said, as if my answer didn't matter. "I'll handle it," I replied quietly. They heard surrender. What I meant was, I'll handle it my way. That afternoon, after they left, I did one small thing, a tiny act of rebellion that would end up detonating everything. I took a piece of paper, grabbed a marker, and scribbled a few words. Then I taped it to the front door, right at eye level. "Be serious, not clowns." It wasn't poetic. It wasn't even particularly mature, but it was honest. We got the kids into pajamas early, mine and Liam's. We planned a movie night. Popcorn, hot cocoa, too many blankets on the living room floor. I could hear my daughter humming upstairs, my son arguing with Liam about which movie to watch. For once, the house felt like ours. At exactly 7:43 p.m., headlights washed over the driveway. I stepped back from the window and watched from the hall. My sister's car doors flew open. My niece and nephew climbed out, backpacks slung over their shoulders, wearing hoodies like it was October instead of late December. No coats, no gloves. 30-degree weather, and they were dressed for a chilly fall afternoon. My sister and my mom didn't walk them all the way up, not at first. They stayed by the car, shouting over the roof as if this was just another drop-off. "Go on, ring the bell," my sister called. "She knows you're coming," my mom added. They assumed I would open the door. I always had. The kids made their way up the porch steps. My niece spotted the note first. I saw her lips move as she read it, her brows knitting. My nephew tilted his head, trying to sound it out. That's when the knocking started. At first it was light, polite, then more insistent. Then came the voices. "Natalie, open the door," my mother shouted. I didn't move. My heart pounded, but my feet stayed planted in the hallway. My daughter peeked down the stairs. "Mom, is something wrong?" I forced a smile. "No, baby, we're just not answering the door tonight." Her small forehead wrinkled, but she nodded and went back to her room, trusting me in a way I suddenly realized my own mother never had. The pounding got louder, then the yelling. "Are you serious right now?" My sister's voice cut through the wood. I stayed quiet. Liam came down the stairs, took one look at my face, and gently steered me back toward the living room. "Come on," he murmured. "They're going to do what they always do. Let's do something different." We turned the movie on. For a while, the sound of animated characters and our kids' laughter battled the muffled shouting outside. Eventually, the yelling stopped. I drifted back toward the front window, staying out of sight but close enough to see the driveway. My mom stood there, with her phone in hand, stabbing at the screen. My sister paced, swearing under her breath. My phone buzzed on the console table, then again and again. Calls, texts. "Are you serious? Open the door. You're being dramatic." I didn't answer. I set the phone face down. 10 minutes later, their stance shifted. They weren't just annoyed anymore, they were rattled. Because both their phones pinged at once. I could see it, even from inside, my sister's face drained of color as she looked down at her screen. The joint account. Years ago, they had insisted we open it for the kids. School expenses, emergencies, family needs only, they said. We would all contribute, but we all slowly turned into just me. Deposit after deposit, birthday money, side gig income, tax refunds I could have used on my own kids. They never put in a single cent, yet somehow the account always managed to be just full enough when they wanted something. What they didn't bother to understand was that the account was legally under my name, my income, my responsibility. What they never expected was that on December 30th, I walked into the bank and withdrew every last dollar. Watching from the window as they stared at their phones, I knew the exact notification they were reading. Balance ayomserum. My sister's hand flew to her mouth. My mother's fingers tightened around her keys. That was the moment they really panicked. Not when I didn't open the door. Not when their kids were standing on my porch in the cold. When the money disappeared. They eventually loaded the kids back into the car. The taillights disappeared down the street. I expected them to call later, to show up again, to demand answers. Hours passed. We finished the movie. The kids fell asleep in a nest of blankets on the living room floor. Liam and I toasted the new year with cheap sparkling cider, the kind that always made the kids giggle when it fizzed. On the surface, everything looked almost normal, but there was a tightness in my chest that wouldn't let go. It didn't feel like a family disagreement anymore. It felt like something meaner, sharper, cruel. At 1:47 a.m., my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost let it go to voicemail. Something in my gut told me to answer. "Hello? Aunt Natalie?" The voice was barely a whisper. "Eli?" I recognized my nephew's breathing before his name. "Where are you, sweetheart? Why aren't you asleep?" "I'm home," he whispered. "At Mom's." The room tilted. "At home? Why aren't you here? I thought you were—" "Eli, where's your sister?" "She's here. We're on the couch. We got cold outside. They said to wait on the porch for a bit, and they'd come back, but they never—" His voice cracked. "How long have you been there alone?" I asked, already shoving my feet into my shoes, fumbling for my keys. He sniffled. Since you didn't open the door." I didn't even hang up. I just told him to unlock the front door and promise me he and his sister wouldn't move. Liam met my eyes as I grabbed my coat. "Be careful," he said. He didn't ask where I was going. He already knew. Their house was dark when I pulled up. No car in the driveway. Front door slightly open, like the house itself was shocked. Inside, the air was cold and stale. The lights were off. Silence pressed against my ears. I found them on the couch, my niece and nephew curled up together under a thin blanket, a dead phone on the coffee table in front of them like a useless lifeline. There was a note on the fridge in my sister's handwriting. "Don't touch anything. No food, no water, no parents. Just two children in an empty house on New Year's Eve." My niece blinked up at me, eyes swollen from crying. My nephew's shoulders sagged with relief when he saw me. "I'm sorry," he whispered, as if any of this was his fault. "You have nothing to be sorry for," I said. I got them into their shoes, wrapped my coat around my niece's shoulders, and walked them out to my car. On the drive back, the city was all fireworks and distant cheering. Inside the car, it was quiet. By the time we reached my house, my kids were still asleep in the blanket fort. I tucked my niece and nephew in beside them, layering on extra blankets, smoothing hair from foreheads that had worried too much for one night. I stood there for a long time, watching four small bodies breathe in sync. They weren't just my sister's kids anymore. They were my responsibility in a way I couldn't step back from. The next morning, I woke up to a phone screen full of missed calls and unread messages. No, are they okay? No, did you find them? Just one text from my mother, sitting at the top like a verdict. You betrayed us. I stared at it until the words blurred. Then I looked at the kids eating cereal at my kitchen table, laughing at a joke Liam made. If this was betrayal, I thought, then they hadn't seen anything yet. At breakfast the next morning, the kitchen felt almost normal. 4 kids at the table, 4 bowls of cereal, cartoons murmuring from the living room. If you cropped the picture just right, you could pretend nothing was wrong. My niece, Sophie, sat between my daughter and my son, one hand around her spoon, the other nervously picking at the hem of her sleeve. My nephew, Eli, kept glancing at the front door like it might suddenly open and undo everything. Liam handed me a mug of coffee, his shoulder brushing mine. You going to call her? He asked quietly. My phone was already in my hand. Missed calls from my mother, missed calls from my sister Tessa, message after message, piling up like debris after a storm. Not one of them asked if the kids were okay. I opened the latest text from my mother. You betrayed us. That was it. Not, where are the kids? Not, are they safe? Just blame. I'm not calling, I said. I want to see how far they'll let this go. Liam studied me for a moment, then nodded. He didn't agree with my family often, but he trusted me. Around 6 that evening, while the kids were sprawled on the living room floor with crayons and construction paper, I remembered the security camera. Last year, after a break-in down the street, I'd convinced Tessa to let me install a small camera above her front door for the kids' safety. She'd rolled her eyes but said yes. She never asked about it again. I pulled up the app on my phone and tapped her address. Frozen footage of her front porch appeared, time-stamped that morning. The door was still cracked open, just like when I'd arrived in the middle of the night. Then the motion sensor triggered. My mother stepped into frame, coat pulled tight, eyes darting around. She stood on the porch for less than 2 minutes. She never went inside, never closed the door, never checked if anyone was there. Just looked, turned around, and left. I stared at the screen until my vision blurred. They hadn't even checked to see if their children were in the house they left wide open. Liam saw my hands shaking and gently took the phone. Save it, he said. You're going to need all of this. That night, we fed the kids spaghetti with jarred sauce and called it fancy. They laughed with their mouths full, red streaks on their cheeks. At one point, Sophie leaned over to my daughter and whispered just loud enough for me to hear. I like it better here. It's not scary. I pretended not to notice the way Liam's jaw tightened. We let them pick the movie. We let them stay up past bedtime. We let them exist like kids, not obligations. For a few hours, they forgot they'd been left behind. The next morning at 7:38 a.m., my phone rang again. Unknown number. I almost ignored it. Then a memory flashed. Eli's whisper from the night before, the way his voice had trembled. I answered. Hello? Is this Natalie Quinn? The voice was male, older, exhausted. Yes, I said cautiously. Who's this? A pause, then. This is Mark Ellis. I'm Tessa's ex-husband. Are my kids with you? I stepped into the hallway, away from the sound of spoons clinking in bowls. Yes, I said. They're safe. They're eating breakfast at my table. I heard him exhale on the other end, a sound halfway between a sob and a prayer. I haven't seen them in 9 months, he said hoarsely. I got a call last night. Well, a kind of call. He explained that one of the kids had somehow managed to use Liam's phone the night before to send a simple message to an old neighbor in the next town over, someone who still followed Tessa on social media. That neighbor had seen a photo Tessa posted on New Year's Eve. Blurry bar lights, champagne flutes. Tessa, my mother, a group of strangers. The caption burned into my brain as he read it aloud. No kids, no drama, finally free for the night. I leaned against the wall, the world tilting. I thought maybe they were with you, Mark said. Then I heard what happened. Are they really okay? I swallowed hard. They're okay, I said. They were alone for hours, but I got them. They slept here. They've eaten. They're trying to be normal. Silence hummed on the line. Then, I'm on my way, he said. I left around midnight when I heard. I should be there by tonight. From where? I asked. 3 states over. You drove all night? My voice came out sharper than I meant. I couldn't just sit there, he said simply. Not after everything else. Everything else. Pieces started to rearrange themselves in my head, little things I'd ignored, excuses Tessa had made, stories she'd told about him being uninvolved, deadbeat, gone. How long has she been blocking you? I asked quietly. Since the custody ruling, he said. 9 months. I send money every month. I call every week. I send letters. I never get anything back. He let out a bitter laugh. Now I know why. I told him to drive safe, told him the kids were here and staying here. When I hung up, I felt something inside me click into place. This wasn't just about babysitting anymore. It wasn't even about the money. It was about neglect, about control, about kids stuck in the crossfire of adults who treated them like bargaining chips. Liam walked in as I slid my phone into my pocket. That was their dad, I said. His eyebrows shot up. And? He's coming, I said. Tonight. That whole day had a strange hum under it. We baked cookies we didn't really need. We played board games. We tried to keep things light while watching the clock. Every so often, Eli would drift toward the window, pretending to look at the yard. Do you think he's really coming? He asked me once, his voice small. Yes, I said without hesitation. He is. For once, I wanted my words to be the safest thing they had. Around 9:15 p.m., my phone buzzed. Mark again. I'm about an hour and a half out, he said. I've stopped twice. Gas and coffee. That's it. You can crash here, I told him. We have a couch. You don't need a hotel. Not yet, he said. First, I need to see them. By 11:03 p.m., headlights swept over our driveway. I stood by the window, heart pounding in my throat. Mark got out of the car before it fully stopped, the door hanging open behind him. His clothes were wrinkled. His face was lined and hollowed by the drive. But his eyes were sharp and desperate and so full of something I hadn't seen from any adult in this story yet. My niece and nephew saw him through the glass before I could say anything. Dad, Eli shouted. They bolted for the front door, bare feet slapping against the hardwood. I barely got the door open before they flew down the steps. Mark dropped to his knees in the front yard, arms open. They crashed into him so hard he nearly fell backward. He clutched them like they were the only solid things left in his world, burying his face in their hair. I'm here, I heard him whisper. I'm here, I'm here, I'm here. I stepped back and let them have that moment, letting the cold night air wash over me. I hadn't realized until then how much tension I'd been carrying in my shoulders. When they finally came inside, we got the kids warm and tucked them back into the nest of blankets in the living room. Within minutes, they were asleep again, this time with their father sitting only a few feet away. Liam took the kids upstairs one by one, laying them gently in our room so we could talk in the kitchen. Mark and I sat at the table, the same table where Liam and I had whispered about boundaries in early December. Now the stakes were bigger than canceled date nights. Mark's hands were rough around the mug I handed him. He didn't drink, just held on to it like something solid. He reached into his backpack and pulled out a worn manila folder. I brought this, he said, in case things were as bad as I thought. He slid it across the table. Inside were letters, birthday cards, hand-drawn pictures, every envelope addressed to Sophie or Eli in a familiar, careful handwriting. None of them looked opened. Some had stamps from months ago. One was marked, returned to sender. Another had a message scrawled across the front in a handwriting I recognized instantly. Do not give her this. Tessa. My chest tightened. Mark took a deep breath and pulled out a stack of printed screenshots next. Bank transfers, he said. Not child support, that goes through the system. These are extra. For groceries, school supplies, clothes. Every time I asked if they needed anything, they said they were fine. I sent it anyway. To your mom or to Tessa. So they took the money, I said slowly, and the kids never knew. He nodded. No calls, no pictures, no thank you, just silence. At the bottom of the stack was a legal document, stapled and stamped. What's this? I asked. Draft petition for emergency custody, he said. My lawyer and I drew it up 4 days before New Year's Eve. I didn't file it right away. I kept hoping she'd let me see them without escalating things. His jaw clenched. Then I got that photo. He reached into his pocket and slid his phone across the table. Tessa's New Year's Eve post filled the screen. Her and my mother in a crowded bar, glasses raised, confetti falling. Caption: No kids, no drama. Finally free for the night. I stared at it, heat rising behind my eyes. They left them alone, I said softly, to go do this. He nodded once. I filed the petition that morning, he said. And today, after talking to you and hearing exactly what happened, my lawyer submitted everything. The abandonment, the unlocked door, the camera footage, your texts. He looked at me seriously. This isn't just a family fight anymore, Natalie. CPS is involved. They've had concerns for months. This might be the thing that finally forces everyone to see it. Something cold slid down my spine. CPS? I repeated. He sighed. School counselor filed a report a while back. Bruises on Sophie's arm. Story didn't add up. Your mom smoothed it over, said it was all a misunderstanding. He looked away for a moment, jaw tight. I wanted to believe it. I didn't push as hard as I should have. That's on me. But now? He met my eyes again. I'm not leaving them with her again. Not after this. The kitchen felt smaller suddenly, the weight of his words pressing against the walls. Tell me what you need from me, I said. He didn't hesitate. Be honest, he said. When they ask you what happened, don't protect her. Don't soften it. I thought about my mother's text. You betrayed us. Maybe for the first time in my life, I understood betrayal from a different angle. It's not betrayal to tell the truth, I said quietly. Not when kids are involved. Mark leaned back in his chair, eyes bloodshot but clear. Then this is where it starts, he said. Right here. Somewhere upstairs, a floorboard creaked. In the living room, 4 small bodies slept in a pile of blankets, unaware that everything in their world was about to change. I looked at the manila folder, the unopened letters, the legal papers. I realized then that I hadn't just been the family babysitter for 5 years. I'd been standing between those kids and a reality no one else wanted to name. And after tonight, there would be no going back. Mark stayed on our couch that night, fully dressed, shoes lined up beside him like he was ready to run at the slightest sound. I didn't sleep at all. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the kids huddled on that cold couch in the dark. I saw the front door cracked open like an accusation. I saw my mother's text. You betrayed us. By morning, the house felt thick with tension, like the air was waiting for something ugly to show up at our door. The kids woke slowly, rubbing their eyes, blinking at the sight of their father asleep, just a few feet away. For a moment, they just stared at him like he might vanish if they moved too quickly. When he opened his eyes, everything in them softened. Sophie leapt onto the couch and hugged him so fiercely he lost his breath. Eli pressed his face into Mark's shoulder, holding on like he'd been waiting months for someone to anchor him. Liam and I stood in the kitchen doorway, watching quietly. Kids shouldn't know what abandonment feels like, but these two did. By noon, my phone buzzed with a text. Not from my mother. Not from my sister. From a number I didn't recognize. CPS has arrived at your sister's residence. Can you confirm the children's location? My hands shook as I typed back. They're with me. Safe. I sent our address. 5 minutes later, a social worker called to confirm every detail I had witnessed the night before. The cold house, the unlocked door, the children left alone for hours. She didn't sound surprised. She sounded like someone who'd seen this pattern before. When she hung up, Mark let out a slow, tired breath. It's starting, he murmured. Doesn't feel like the beginning, I said. Feels like the explosion. At 2:11 p.m., a police cruiser rolled into my sister's driveway. Then another. A CPS vehicle followed. Mark and I watched from my phone's live camera feed as Tessa pulled up behind them, slamming her car door so hard the frame shook. She stormed up the porch steps, shouting before she even reached the officers. That's my house! What are you doing here? One of the officers stepped forward, calm but firm. Ma'am, CPS has concerns about the welfare of the children. We need to conduct an assessment. They're fine, she shrieked. They're with my sister. She stole them. Mark made a low, bitter sound in his throat. She didn't even check if they were okay, he said quietly. She still hasn't asked you if they cried or ate or slept. I glanced at him. You noticed that too? Every word she said was about control, not about them. He wasn't wrong. It was never about the kids for my sister. Not really. At 4:47 p.m., after hours of silence, a car screeched into my driveway. The slam of a car door followed. Liam glanced at me. Ready? He asked. No, I said honestly, but I guess we're doing this anyway. I stepped outside before they could start pounding. My sister stood on my porch like a thunderstorm packed into a single body. My mother hovered behind her, arms crossed, chin lifted, the picture of righteous indignation. They didn't knock. They just glared at me, waiting. Tessa's jaw was clenched so tightly I could see the muscles jumping beneath her skin. Where are my kids? The words came out low, poisonous. I kept my hand on the doorknob, blocking the entrance behind me. They're safe, I said, unlike when you left them alone overnight. She stepped forward, trying to shove past me. Liam pushed the door open from behind and planted himself between us, towering over her, not threatening, just unmovable. You're not coming in, he said. My mother snapped, Don't you speak to my daughter like... Your daughter abandoned 2 children in a cold house with the door unlocked. Liam cut in. If that's what you raised, maybe don't lecture anyone. My mother's face twisted like she'd been slapped. Tessa jabbed her finger at me. You think you're the hero here? You failed us. You made this worse. You betrayed your own family. I didn't yell. I didn't defend. I didn't argue. I was done explaining myself to people who didn't care about the truth. Do you want to know what betrayal looks like? I said quietly. Not once did either of you ask if the kids were scared. Silence. Their expressions didn't change. That's what I thought, I said. My mother's voice trembled with fury. You think Liam is so perfect? He's the one turning you against family. He's manipulating you. I laughed. Hard. It came out sharp and humorless. Liam was the only adult who didn't abandon your grandchildren, I said. Think about that. Then Tessa crossed the line. That custody battle was a joke, she spat. Their father doesn't get a say. Those kids are mine. You don't get to decide where they go. The door behind me opened. Mark stepped out, legal document in hand, voice steady. Actually, he said, the court does. Tessa turned and froze. He held out the custody order. Emergency custody granted, effective immediately. Visitation suspended pending review. Her face went white. My mother reached, but Mark pulled the document back. You'll get your copy through your lawyer, he said. For a moment, no one moved. Then my sister lunged. I barely had time to react before she shoved toward the doorway, screaming. I'm taking my kids. You can't stop me. But she didn't get more than 2 steps. Liam held firm, blocking the entrance. And behind me, from the living room, I heard my daughter gasp. Mom? I turned immediately. Close the door, I told Liam. He did. Outside, my mother and sister kept screaming. Rage, threats, hysterical accusations. I didn't open the door again. Within 10 minutes, the police arrived, this time with a copy of the restraining order Mark had filed earlier that morning. The officers stepped between us and them. Ma'am, you need to leave the property, one said. Now. This is a misunderstanding, my mother shrieked. This is a court order, the officer corrected. Another officer guided them down the steps. My sister was still yelling threats as she got into her car. You're going to regret this, all of you. This is war. Her tires screeched as she sped away. My mother followed, face twisted with a hatred I didn't recognize. Liam put his hand on my shoulder. You okay? I didn't answer right away, because for the first time, I realized something. My mother wasn't angry that I protected the kids. She was angry that I stopped letting her control me. And that was something she would never forgive. Inside, Sophie and Eli huddled on the couch, wide-eyed. Mark knelt in front of them. You're safe, he told them softly. No one is taking you away tonight. Not from me, not from Natalie. You're safe. Sophie burst into tears. Eli wrapped his arms around his father's neck. Liam squeezed my hand, grounding me. This wasn't about revenge, or winning, or proving a point. This was about 2 kids who finally had people fighting for them, and a family that wasn't going to get away with pretending it was love. Come on, I whispered. Let's get everyone upstairs. They've had enough for one day. But even as we got the kids settled and dimmed the lights, I knew this wasn't over. Not even close. The house was quiet for the first time in days. Not peaceful, not calm, just quiet, the kind that sits on your chest. 4 kids slept in one room, curled into a quilted ocean of blankets. Mark slept on the couch again, but this time on his side, one hand stretched out toward the hallway like he was trying to reach his kids even in sleep. Liam made chamomile tea and set it in front of me. You're shaking, he said gently. I hadn't noticed until he pointed it out. I'm fine, I lied. No, you're not. No one would be. He sat beside me, his fingers brushing mine. You did the right thing, he said. Whatever comes next, you've already done the right thing. I exhaled, long and shaky. I don't think they've ever hated me this much, I whispered. That's because, Liam said, for the first time in your life you didn't bend. And he was right. This wasn't punishment for an action. This was punishment for disobedience. For saying no to a family that had never accepted that word from me. The next morning, my phone buzzed again. Not a call. A message from an unknown number. Short. Professional. Emergency custody hearing in 3 hours. All parties notified. Children will not be removed from current placement. I stared at the screen until the words went fuzzy. They're staying here until the hearing, I said. Mark nodded, shoulders sagging with relief he didn't try to hide. I'm not letting them out of my sight, he murmured. We fed the kids breakfast, pancakes and fruit, something warm and grounding, and Mark sat beside them, brushing crumbs off Sophie's cheek like he was afraid she'd slip away if he blinked. I watched them with a strange ache in my chest. He wasn't a perfect man, but he was a present father, and that made all the difference. By noon, Liam and I had the kids bundled in the living room with board games, movies, and snacks. Mark stayed with them while I stepped out onto the porch for a breath of cold January air. That's when a police cruiser pulled into the driveway. I froze. The officer stepped out, not with urgency, but with a clipboard. Ms. Quinn? Yes? He handed me an official document. Your presence is not required at the courthouse today. However, CPS has requested follow-up interviews with you and your partner. They've already filed preliminary findings. My pulse quickened. Preliminary findings? The officer nodded. Concerns about chronic neglect, endangerment, possible physical discipline, documented history of obstructing custody arrangements. He paused. And a report from last night's attempted forced entry. My knees almost gave out. This was real, all of it. This wasn't another family fight we'd all pretend never happened. Is this enough? I whispered. For now, he said gently. Yes. He tipped his hat and left. I shut the door and leaned against it, heart pounding. Liam found me there moments later. What is it? He asked. I handed him the paper. He scanned it once, twice. This is good, he said. This is exactly what needed to happen. I should have felt relief, but all I felt was the weight of everything unraveling. Because once a family splits like this, they never go back to the same shape. By late afternoon, the court hearing had finished. We were waiting, Mark on the couch, leaning forward, elbows on knees, me pacing the kitchen with a cold cup of tea. Then his phone buzzed. He answered immediately. Yes, this is Mark. Silence. A long breath, a soft, incredulous exhale. He closed his eyes. I understand, thank you. He hung up and looked at me. Full emergency custody, he said softly. Effective immediately. Permanent custody, pending scheduled review. My throat tightened. You did it, I whispered. No, he said, voice breaking. You did. They never would have listened if you hadn't stepped in. I shook my head. This was never about helping you. This was about the kids. He nodded. That's why it worked. That evening, the kids picked the dinner. Pizza, ice cream, waffles, everything sugary and chaotic. The kind of meal kids only choose when they feel safe enough to be ridiculous. We let them build a blanket fort in the living room. We let them stay up late. We let them laugh until they fell asleep together in one tangled pile. It felt like a goodbye party disguised as a sleepover. I don't think any of us said it out loud, but we all felt it. Tomorrow would change everything. The next morning, the house was full of the smell of waffles, full of laughter, full of the quiet, heavy knowledge that this would be the last morning we shared under the same roof. Mark packed the car slowly, carefully. Not with backpacks filled with hand-me-downs and forgotten toys like before. With real bags, real clothes, real belongings, things chosen just for them. Sophie hugged me first, arms tight around my waist. I didn't think grown-ups could fix things like this, she whispered. I swallowed hard. Sometimes, I said, you just need someone brave enough to start. Eli hugged me next. You didn't let them leave us, he said into my shirt. No, I whispered, hand on the back of his head. I didn't. I never could. Mark came over, eyes glassy. I don't have words for this, he said. Not enough anyway. You don't owe me anything, I said. Just give them the life they've been waiting for. I will, he said. I swear to you, I will. He hugged me, a quick, tight, grateful embrace, and then ushered the kids toward the car. They waved from the back seat, faces glowing with something I hadn't seen before. Freedom, hope, safety. Mark pulled out of the driveway slowly, one hand lifted in a final wave. We stood there watching the taillights disappear. Liam's arm slipped around my waist. You okay? He asked. Yes, I whispered, but also, no. That's how you know you did it right, he said. That night my phone buzzed. A picture message. Mark, in a soft-lit bedroom, tucking the kids into brand-new beds. Nightlights glowing. Books on pillows. Stuffed animals tucked beside them. The caption. Safe. I sank onto the couch, tears spilling quietly. Not sadness, not relief, something deeper. A clean break. A line that couldn't be crossed again. As if the universe wanted to test that resolve, another text arrived moments later. My mother. Just 2 words. You'll see. No apology, no remorse, no acknowledgement. Just a final threat from a woman who still believed this was a game of power. I stared at it for a long moment. Then I turned off my phone. Because this wasn't about power. It wasn't about winning. It wasn't even about them. It was about 2 children who deserved better than the people who were supposed to love them. It was about the moment I stopped being the family's cleanup crew. It was about starting something better. For them, for me, for all of us who were done with weaponized guilt disguised as love. And finally, it was about freedom.